Hi, hello, and welcome to PJs and Pages with Danielle. I'm Danielle, and I'm really excited because I finally got my camera, my real camera, out of a box. So I can use a real camera now, which is kind of exciting. So this is me trying to use the new camera. We'll see how it goes. I'm really hoping that this works out really well. Today what I wanted to do was talk about the books that I'm considering rereading, if not this year, within the next couple of years. One of my goals for 2024 was to reread books that brought me joy and rekindle my love of reading. So these are the books that I want to get to. And let's start with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I read it back in 2020 when it first came out, and besides being an absolutely gorgeous cover, it is a beautiful book full of lyrical writing about a woman who was born in the 1700s, and she's about to be married off, and in her desperation to not let this happen, she makes a deal with a demon. And the deal is that she gets to live forever. She doesn't have to marry this man, but nobody can remember who she is. So she travels the world for centuries, just, living life and being forgotten. So she's basically a homeless nomad for centuries. And one day she's in New York in the present day, and she goes into this bookshop in New York. She steals a book. The bookshop seller runs after her, can't catch her. She comes back the next day because he's not going to remember who she is. Well, she walks into the bookstore and he remembers exactly who she is. So this story it's basically about Addie LaRue and what it means to live a life, what makes a life worth living, let's say that. And it also is a book about her relationship with both the demon and with Henry, the man who remembers who she is. So it's a beautiful story, highly recommended, and I cannot wait to reread this. I have already annotated it, so I will just be reading it just for pleasure. It's a beautiful book. I cannot wait to read this again. Another book that I want to reread is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book is just a warm hug of a book. It is so lovely. I remember feeling so happy while reading it and just having the happiest golden feeling in my heart after reading it. I read it with my book club, Overbooked Book Club, with Shell, and I think it was a unanimous that we all loved this book. So The House in the Cerulean Sea is about Linus Baker, who's this 40-year-old man who works for the department in charge of magical youth, and he is sent by extremely upper management to an island to determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous that they are likely to bring about the end of days. And it may sound high stakes, but it's not. These children are glorious. They are so sweet, and the man who runs the orphanage is he's the perfect man. So anyway, Linus goes over there, and it is a story about found family. It is a story about accepting who you are and loving being different and all of that. So I really, really want to reread this book because it just made me feel so good while reading it. Another book I want to reread is A Study in Drowning. This was one of my favorite books of 2023. I posted, I'm not going to talk too much about what it's about because it's posted in my review of those books, but basically A Study in Drowning is a dark academia, gothic, YA romance, and it is beautifully written, and I read it in 2023, loved it, but I didn't annotate it, and I want to go back and underline all of the beautiful writing in this because there was so many beautiful lines, and I need to write in it. So I want to reread this specifically to annotate it. When my son was born, I started getting back into reading, and one of the books that I read that really brought that about was Lessons in Chemistry by Garmus. I loved this book. It is about a woman in the 1960s who is a scientist, and she's a little bit odd, and through some unforeseen circumstances she ends up a single mother, and in order to pay the bills she takes on this role as she can cook really well, so she starts this like cooking channel show called Supper at 6, and through this channel she actually starts teaching housewives around the US about chemistry and just broadening women's horizons and their minds, and it was such a good story, so impactful. There is a show out on Apple TV, I believe, and I really want to watch the show, but I want to reread it before I do. So I want to reread Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus so that I can watch the show. I talked about this book in my comfort reads, and it is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I've reread it twice already, but I really want to read it again. And like I said, reading books is about bringing joy to yourself. So if this book brings me joy and I want to read it a million times, I'm going to read it a million times. I want to reread Beach Read because it was just such a lovely book. I've already annotated it, but I think I want to replace my tabs with some clear tabs because these are opaque and it makes it hard to read through them. But this one basically, I've talked about what it's about, but it's about two authors who end up living next to each other. They have writer's block and they decide to swap genres and fall in love. So it's just a happy book. It makes me happy. I want to reread it. I want to reread it. Okay. Stephen King is one of my favorite writers, and one of the books that I absolutely loved, you can see that I annotated it like crazy, was The Shining, and I've only read it one time, so I want to give this book a reread and see if I love it as much the second time around. This one is basically about Danny Torrance, who's this 5-year-old, and his dad gets this job at the Overlook Hotel in Colorado as the off-season, what is it called? The off-season caretaker for the hotel, and there are some sinister things happening at this hotel, and Danny seems to be the only one who can see what's happening. So an amazing book, but it has beautiful writing in it, and I loved it so much, and I really want to reread it again. When I graduated from college, I hadn't read an adult book in a while. I did my degree in elementary education, so I had to read a lot of children's literature, but I didn't read a lot of adult literature. And when I got out of college, one of the first books that I picked up was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And this book was so magical. It just like burst this whole bubble, and I started reading like crazy again. The Night Circus is about a circus, a magical circus with these two young magicians who are dueling. And they've been trained since childhood by these two instructors who basically are rivals, and they end up falling in love, and there's very high stakes, and it was romantic, it was dark, it was just very lyrical writing. It was so beautiful. This was before my annotating phase, and I kind of want to go back, reread it, and annotate it. So, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I've mentioned before that one of the books that I'm going to be reading this year is Anne of Green Gables, and that is for my Sisterhood of the Traveling Book Club. For the first book that I gave them, I think it was some book that had nostalgic things for me, and it wasn't that great, but this book, I've reread it a million times, and it's about Anne Shirley, who is an orphan and is sent to live with Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert in Green Gables, and all about the adventures and misadventures she gets up to. So this one I'm going to be annotating and sending off to my friends so that they can read it and annotate it as well. And finally, last year, one of the best romances I read, it didn't make it into my list of top books, but I really should have mentioned it. It was Georgie All Along by Kate Clayborn. Georgie All Along is about a girl, Georgie, who ends up back in her hometown through unforeseen circumstances, and she wants a redo essentially, and she finds this diary she had when she was a teenager with a list of action items that she never got to complete. She's one of those people pleasers, people who do things for everybody else and never does anything for herself. So she decides, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to complete this list. And she ends up living at her parents' house and staying there for a while. Her parents are out of town, and she ends up with an unexpected roommate, Levi Fanning, who was a troublemaker for the town, and he is also a hermit, grumpy sunshine, and he offers to help her with her quest in completing this list of items. So it was such a sweet book. I felt so good while reading it. I remember I picked it up and I could not put it down. I just love Georgie and Levi so much, and I really want to reread this just for the feeling that it gave me. It was such a lovely book, and I cannot wait to reread this as well. So that's it. That's all the books I want to reread, at least for now. I'm sure there's others, but for right now, that stack is the stack of books that I want to try to reread. If not this year, then between this year and next year. Let me know in the comments, are there any books that you're looking forward to rereading? Do you reread books or not? How do you feel about rereading? I'd love to know, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!